Happy Friday, everybody. Happy Friday. Woo, it has been a busy week. Welcome to Mad Gains Live. I am Cassandra Gaines. I'm so excited. And oh, you guys are a little surprised by my new treat. I look like Dr. Disrespect for anybody who's on Twitch. I did this for Vitaly. He loves Dr. Disrespect. So welcome, you guys. We have a new layout, new screen. You have to let me know what you guys think. I should be on YouTube by now. For those of you who are on other platforms, come on over to YouTube. That is where all the chatter is going to be. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you hit the subscribe button, there's this little spot right there that your name will pop up. And then I think this spot is for like some kind of super chat right in the middle. And then this spot is for donations. If anyone just wants to give away money, I am willing to accept the money. So let me switch over because I want to tell everybody. Let me see. I got to go back. I still have to figure out how to operate this thing. So watch this shit. Yeah. All right. So we have Doug Wagner, CEO of Echo, who's joining us today. Doug, you are actually on the screen now. You've got a chat going on above your head. We've got gadgets, we've got logos. And speaking of logos that are right above my head. So today's episode is sponsored by two companies. OTR Capital, which is my favorite factoring company. And I'll tell you why. I love them because they treat you like family. So no hidden fees. They're going to help you with your back end work. They're going to help you source loads or load matching. And also, they're not going to mess around with your data too. I know a lot of carriers are worried about that. So OTR doesn't play games with your data. I think you guys should find Grace. She's going to be in the comments. Make friends with her. Some of you might remember that she was actually on our factoring episode about 2 months ago. That was a really good episode. So if you haven't watched that, watch it. And you can also get to know Grace too. She's very cool. We also see a new company up above called Tive. I'm very excited about this company. I love this startup. Okay, I wrote down a couple notes for you guys. I want you guys to know this because I did my research. So back in the day when I used to be involved with cargo security, we used to put GPS on, expensive loads of electronics or different things like that. And they were kind of janky. Sometimes the GPS cut out, who never know. But these ones, so Tive is a different type of tracker. So what I learned is a single use tracker that you can put on the load, and it uses 5G for GPS tracking, which is better than our older ones that we're used to. No lithium batteries, so it's a really nice battery and it's cost efficient. So you will find Krenar in the feed and make friends with him and join and connect with him on LinkedIn too. He's new to Madtropolis. We are very excited to have you both. And Doug, thank you for coming on. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Cassandra. You look like Joe Rogan there with your front end advertisers.
Yeah. Okay. You actually started this because you're the one who sent me you were like, oh, look how Joe Rogan does this. I don't know, these kind of sponsorships. And I was like, if Joe can do it, I can do it.
For sure.
Were you nervous about coming on today?
Yeah, I'm always nervous when I got to get in front of you, especially with an audience, because who knows what you're going to get, right?
For those of you who, this is the first time you're even seeing Doug came on back in, I think it was March or May. I can't remember, but it was very early on when Mad Gains was a little wild. It's still wild, and I lied to Doug. I told him, come on for 15 minutes. Just pop in, answer a few questions, and you can just leave. And Doug knows lawyers sometimes lie or don't tell the whole truth. I think we had you for almost 2 hours, Doug.
Yeah, I had to take a shower when I was finished.
And I know the Echo people loved it, but we're glad you're back on. And I did promise Doug I would keep this more vanilla. So Echo's marketing SVP, Chris Clemenson, I think he just like sighed, like a big relief. Like he's like, oh, thank God. She's not going to be crazy on Doug again this time. So Um, there are some different topics I wanted to talk to you about, but I'm gonna skip ahead to one of my favorite topics that I'm very interested in what you have to say, which is did you watch the debate between Molo, the CEO of Molo, Convoy, and with our shipper Ron Kane?
Yeah, that was better than Trump Biden.
That was actually. What were some of your thoughts? Like my one of my favorite parts, because I love Ron, is hey, Becker just donated. Wow, cool. Look at all this stuff going on down here. Sorry, squirrel. Um one of my favorite parts was when Andrew Silver asks to Convoy, challenges Convoy and says, when are you guys going to make money? And Ron's like, why do you care? And Ron says that there are a lot of shippers out there who just simply don't care about whether a broker is going to lose, if they're running a negative margin or not. And it was interesting because I rewatched the episode and then I watched the comments on different social media platforms. And I saw that some shippers agreed with Ron and then some shippers disagreed with him. But I knew that brokers were really like wildly, vehemently disagreed with Ron. What were your thoughts when you heard that?
Well, I think there's two sides of it. If you ask me personally, how do you like competing against companies that don't necessarily have to make a profit and can price for market share? I would say I hate that, right? Because it's tough to compete with that when my investors expect me to make a profit. On the other hand, I can't judge it because I agree with Ron in that respect, in that who cares if a company makes profit or not? If I wanted to buy products at Best Buy and they're losing money, but they've got a good deal on a TV, that doesn't stop me from going to Best Buy to buy that TV. So I think you have to look a little deeper and understand what are the motivations of those companies and their investors, because that sort of dictates the strategy, and in some cases creates different sets of rules. But I don't, I can't judge anybody and what their strategy is, whether they want to, price for market share and take market share, or, have slow profitable growth.
Yeah, I thought most would have the same feeling. I mean, I saw some people in the comments that were saying, it's very important to know whether a broker is going to go out of business or not. But I think, like, okay, so you've been in the business for a long time. I'm trying to remember the last time a major broker like Convoy, the size of Convoy, went out of business.
Yeah, I can't think of it. In the old days, when you had a lot of unionized LTL carriers, there were a lot of bankruptcies. And the shippers out there will remember having their freight stranded, in an LTL carrier's network. And so that did cause a lot of concern with shippers about the profitability of their LTL carriers. But, those days are pretty much gone. And for the most part, most LTL carriers are profitable. But in the case of a broker, they don't even physically possess the freight. So I can't imagine that brokers have a lot of concern about the profitability. Shippers have a lot of concern about the profitability of their brokers.
What's the
They want price and they want service.
Yeah, but that's what most shippers were the ones that told me they want. They just want their pricing, and they said that if a shipper goes out of business, then we're going to. Sorry, if a broker goes out of business, then we're going to, pick another broker. There's
find a new broker.
Yeah. So it is interesting to think about that. But there were a lot of brokers that came out vehemently saying, no, shippers need to be careful who they do business with. They don't want to have to. If a broker goes out of business, the shippers can be on the hook for paying the carriers, which is often a problem in our industry with, I think, maybe smaller brokers, not something of your size or whatnot. So what is the difference with finances, since Echo's a public company and something like Convoy and Molo and other companies are private and have investors? What's the difference here when it comes to reporting finances?
Well, it's a great question, and it's more than just reporting finances. I think if you look at kind of the DNA of different types of companies, right? You've got public companies, you've got, call it private equity backed companies, and then you've got venture capital backed companies. And if you look at those types of investors, they're kind of on a spectrum, right? And so public company investors are very risk averse.
Mm-hmm.
They have fairly modest goals for their investing. They generally just want to beat the S&P. And in order to do that, they need to pick good stocks that grow the top line and grow the bottom line and increase their EPS. And then they use stock price divided by EPS to come up with a multiple to do comparable analysis of valuation. So that's the conservative end of the spectrum. Now, being a public company takes a lot of rigor. You know, you've got to the process of going public, which we did in 2009. You know, you've got to get everything buttoned up. You've got to get internal audit procedures in place. You've got to get Sarbanes-Oxley compliant. You've got reporting requirements, and it takes a whole lot of the management team's time, you know, doing the things that you have to do as a public company. So I would say that in that realm, you know, public companies have probably more modest expectations from their investors. They have high expectations around risk. They don't want you taking any. And, you know, you've got all the paperwork to do to be a public company and all the time that it takes to meet with investors. Kind of the next realm, I would say, would be private equity-backed companies. Private equity investors have a larger appetite for risk, right? And they don't just want to beat the S&P 500. You know, they want to make a 2.5, 3, 4, even 5 times cash on cash return for their investment, and they'd like to do it in 4 years. So they're taking more risk, but they also have expectations for a bigger return, you know? And so that's going to dictate a certain type of company strategy and a market strategy that might be a little different than a public company. And then on the other extreme, you've got private equity-backed companies. Mm-hmm. And, you know, private equity investors, you know, routinely shoot for 5 to 10 times cash on cash return, but they also know that they might only have 2 out of 10 companies that actually hit. So they're big risk takers, but they also expect to make big returns when they hit it. And, you know, a lot of that mindset has grown up out of Silicon Valley, where, you know, there have been lots of home runs and people get excited about those opportunities. And mm-hmm. So those 3 different types of investors, you know, the public company investors, which are mutual funds and hedge funds and retirement funds and, you know, sovereign wealth funds, those are very conservative investors for the most part. Private equity in the middle, venture capital, man, they're gunslingers. So they've seen the success that tech companies have had, throwing capital at buying market share, and then turning up the pricing dial at some point in the future to get profitable when it's time to do that. And the perfect case example of that would be Amazon and Jeff Bezos. You know, for years, they were not profitable.
That's right.
But they were buying market share. They were disintermediating the market. Mm-hmm. And so, and they were also a story stock, you know, so as a public company, sub-public companies get a break and they can operate a little bit differently. And they would call that a story stock because there's a great story to tell and a very charismatic leader in the Jeff Bezos. So not many companies have the luxury of doing that. And Amazon was one of them, and some other tech companies do that. But so if you look at those 3 classes of investors, it just creates a different set of dynamics, different expectations, different risk tolerance. And so companies behave differently in those environments. And so I think that explains a lot of the differences that we have. And, you know, I don't think you can say one is right or one is wrong.
Yeah, it probably just fits for what fits for the company. What fit best for Echo when you were deciding, I think it was in 2010, whether you want to take it public, or you want to keep it private and continue to get investors? Like, what was your deciding points? Because to me, when a company goes public, like I was at Schneider when Schneider went public, and I was so disappointed because there's just so much. The company's just so different when you go public. You have to be so careful. You can't make snap judgment moves, and you do often have to put profit ahead of other considerations. From a non-CEO saying that. Could be different since you've been doing it a lot longer, but I'll let you answer.
Yeah. Well, you know, our company was started in 2005. I joined the two founders in '06. They brought me in as a CEO and they bought my tech company from me. And they told me from the day they hired me that they were going to do an IPO someday. That was going to be their exit.
Okay.
And so in 2009, in September of '09, we actually did the IPO. And at the time, our revenues were about 260 million. And if you think about it, that was probably too soon.
Yeah.
You know, we could have raised capital a lot of other ways. And we, in a sense, we backed ourselves in a corner because we went out, you know, when you do an IPO, you spend a lot of time marketing the story, meeting with investors, meeting with analysts. And, you know, we said, hey, we're going to grow and we're going to be profitable. You know, we're a growth company and we're profitable. Well, the truth of the matter is, you know, for a startup, and we considered ourselves to be a tech startup in those days, it's hard to do both. You know, it's hard to have monster growth and also be profitable.
Yeah.
In the early years, you can probably do one or the other.
Yeah.
And so one thing I'm proud of at Echo is we actually did both, but it was really hard.
Yeah.
And we probably could have grown a lot faster if we were willing to give up some of our profitability. But going public at 260 million of revenue was probably a little bit soon, especially when you look at the size of some of the public transportation companies and their revenues. You know, we were considerably smaller. But it was a good story. Investors liked it. They wanted to place bets on it. And so we were very successful in the IPO and we got a good price. But you know, it wasn't really my call. It was the predominant owners of that time. That's how they wanted to monetize their investment. And so that's what we did.
What was the tech company that they bought? You said they bought your tech company.
Yeah, I had a company called Selectrans, and it was maybe it was ahead of its time. This was back in 2005. I started it, and it was a SaaS TMS company that was designed for shippers and brokers. And so I spent a year and a half with a partner, and the two of us wrote the code, and we started marketing it. We brought on about 6 customers. And at the time that I was approached by the two founders of Echo, you know, I was having a lot of fun with my new little tech startup. And they told me a pretty compelling story about why I should join them. And one of the most compelling parts of it was that they had money and I didn't. so
You're like, oh, well, put it that way.
So I joined them and, you know, I said, what do you want me to do with my company? You know, because they bought it. And they said, do whatever you want with it. You know, you can keep running it on the side. You can take some of the technology and put it into Echo. They were very flexible and we ended up shutting it down over time. But we actually incorporated some of the code that I wrote into the systems at Echo.
I was just going to ask that.
And I was, yeah, so I'm not that good of a coder, by the way, but you know, I can hack a little bit. And so that was the origins.
There used to be at Echo this guy. He was in the tech department. This just reminded me because of coding. And he wore all jean outfits, like a jean jacket, jeans, jean shirt. Do you remember this guy? Is he still with Echo?
I don't think so.
He would always go busting into your office. Like you'd be in middle meetings and he'd just be like, I want to talk about da 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 da. And we all used to be like, who's that? Sorry, very squirrel moment, but it just reminded me when you said coding that like you were close with the IT folks and they loved you. They would bust into your office like you were their best friend. And, and
that's because I always go stick my nose in their business and try to insert myself into the technology.
Yeah, and I'm sure they appreciated the attention too. And rule of thumb for anybody who's new to this industry or working at a big company, if you make best friends with the IT people, you are golden. Because I used to go over at Echo and I used to bring them food and make friends with all of them. So if I needed a hookup, they would hook me up and they prioritize me when things went wrong. They're the department to make happy at all times. So you recently, actually, wait a second. I'm not paying attention to the comments and the questions. For those of you who have questions for Doug, when do you get to ask somebody like Doug questions? This is your opportunity. Look for Amanda Miller. She is my favorite flatbed broker out of Alabama, and she will funnel your questions to me. And if you have any questions about any of the tech or whatever's going on over here, I see we have a lot of chatter. Um, find Amanda. She knows everything that's going on. So here we go. Andrew Silver's in the comments, cracking me up. I'm trying to pay attention to Doug, and I've got Andrew Silver cracking me up. Okay, so we have another Andrew Teal at Madtropolis. Andrew Teal. Okay,
Okay.
so Andrew Teal says, I would love Doug's perspective on the Q3 environment shippers brokers felt compared to muted results JB Hunt Martin and Heartland often have reported already. Doug, do you know what that means?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I don't. Andrew is obsessed with data and all this stuff, and often he asks questions that I hope the guest will understand.
Yeah, I know what it means. Unfortunately, I can't talk a lot about it because we haven't reported yet.
Oh, okay.
And we report in 2 weeks or next week. So, okay.
Okay, so Andrew Teal,
Q3
you're gonna
was,
have to wait. Oh, go ahead, Doug. Sorry.
well, I'll talk a little bit about it. I just can't talk about Echo's results. So, Q3 was a crazy market. We came into April, we saw the COVID pandemic hit, companies started sending people home. Some of them closed doors. It wasn't uncommon with transportation companies to see drops of revenue in the neighborhood of 20 or 25, even 30%, in the end of March, early April. Then by mid-May, we started to see business coming back.
Yeah.
And we saw a lot of volume growth. And there are a lot of stories about why that happened and a lot of theories, but I think it's generally accepted that people were staying at home and they weren't buying services, they weren't flying on airplanes, they weren't staying in hotels.
That's right.
They weren't going on vacation, but they were buying more stuff, and that stuff has to ship. So retail's done pretty good. And I think there was another couple of factors at play. You had a lot of the smaller shippers that were completely shut down. And when they reopened, they pretty quickly depleted their inventories. And then when they went to their suppliers to get, additional inventory, it took a lot longer than normal. So I think we have a major disruption in the supply chain, not to mention the freight that comes from Asia and China and the disruption that we saw in the ocean freight. And so it's hard to tell, but back to your question. So Q3, we saw this tremendous surge of freight. And at the same time, the truckload carriers were tapped out on capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a couple of things, right? First of all, they don't have drivers. There were a lot of drivers that were furloughed back in March and April. And a lot of those drivers chose to stay home when the unemployment subsidies came along, paid more money to stay at home on your couch than to drive a truck, and the quality of life's a lot better. And then even when that came to an end, there was a sentiment with some drivers that I think there's going to be another round of stimulus. So I'm going to wait and see. And so there were a lot of drivers that just chose to sit out. You had another situation where, if you look at the larger truckload carriers, they source a lot of their drivers from driving schools. And driving schools
shut down.
Are either shut down or their enrollment is de minimis.
I didn't even think of that.
So, the truckload carriers have a fairly severe driver problem right now. And normally in this type of a market, what would happen? The truckload carriers would go out and buy more trucks. And we've seen some increase in truck purchases recently. I haven't studied it that much, but I don't think it's significantly above the replacement level. So, and why aren't they buying trucks? It's because they don't have people to drive them. I talked to some carriers recently that said, generally they would model into their network about 4 to 5% unseated tractors. That means they've got tractors on the fence. When one breaks down, they bring one into service, and 4 or 5% is about the right amount. I've heard recently there are carriers that have, around 15% unseated tractors right now, which is unheard of given, all the freight that exists in the marketplace. So it's just this crazy market. Prices, the last time I looked, and it's been a couple of weeks ago, had increased in the truckload markets 20 straight weeks in a row. And so if you think about that, you've got all the dynamics that we all know about. You've got your contractual freight getting squeezed. You've got your spot freight where, you're charging much higher rates. And so there's just been a lot of noise in the market. And so I think, I haven't really studied the JB Hunt numbers, and it's not my place to do it, and certainly not here. But I think if you look at the Q3 results for the public company brokers, it's really going to come down to how well did they manage their mix of business, contract versus spot, repricing, and all the dynamics that go on, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think that, okay, so can we talk about the LTL market a little bit too? For those who don't know, we've been on this show. I do tend to focus on truckload and lean toward truckload, but from an LTL perspective, have those carriers been facing the same driver shortage and the same volatile nature of rates?
No, LTL carriers. First of all, driving for an LTL carrier is the best job in town, right? Because you come to work every day and you go home every night. If you're a pickup and delivery driver, and if you're a over the road driver, you're typically going out and back, and you're gone for a day and you have one night in a hotel, and so it's a much better life than driving over the road for a truckload carrier or as an owner operator. So they don't tend to have driver shortages like the truckload carriers do. The problem that the LTL carriers have had is that they run a terminal network, right? So they've got these hub and spoke terminals. They have dozens or hundreds of brick and mortar terminals, and the drivers go in every day to the terminals. You've got dock workers that are loading their trailers, and so they're in close proximity to each other, and so you have a bit of a COVID problem. So right now in the LTL market, freight volumes are pretty strong. The rates aren't as volatile as in truckload, but a lot of the carriers are being impacted by COVID. They may have a terminal where there's an outbreak and they don't have enough people to staff the terminal. So it's an interesting time for LTL because they have to come to unlike Echo, we have nearly all of our employees working from home right now. But if you're an LTL carrier, everybody has to go to work.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wish that there was a way we could make the truckload market more steady and consistent. And not to go back to Ron Kane, poor Ron, I keep citing to him, but he made a point in one of our episodes one time that, because I was kind of complaining, actually it might have been the episode with you, I was kind of complaining, like, I wish we could do something to make the truckload industry more stable. And he had said, I don't know if the industry wants that. Sometimes I feel as though the industry likes the volatility. They thrive off of it, and they enjoy the nature of it. What do you think about that?
Well, the truckload market's just very inefficient, right? So you've got a lot of parts that make it inefficient. You've got shippers that have budgets and they run an annual RFP. And who can predict prices in this business, a year from now? Nobody. I don't care how good your algorithms are, you can't do it. There's too many exogenous factors that can affect, either supply or demand. So first of all, you have shippers with budgets. They run RFPs. You've got a fixed commitment between either a carrier and a shipper, or a broker and a shipper. And the market moves from that. It moves up or it moves down. And Dan talked a little bit about this, in that last broadcast that you did. So when the market, let's just talk about a rising market. The rates go skyrocketing like we've seen in Q3, going up 20 weeks in a row, and over time, truckload carriers actually lead the way on this. They start to refuse freight or give it back. That gives more spot market opportunity to other carriers or other brokers. So you start to see a movement of freight from the contractual segment into the spot because of the load tender rejections. And the spot market in that kind of condition is always going to carry a higher price. So as the shipper has to keep paying a higher price because more and more of their freight is going into the spot market, they're actually motivated to renegotiate their contract freight
Yep.
to mitigate the increase in spot freight. So, everybody says the big bad brokers and carriers go in and change the price. Well, it's the marketplace that's making that happen. And so, but go back to the shipper's point of view, he gave his boss a budget and now he's busting the budget.
Mm-hmm.
And, in 2018, there were a lot of supply chain people that got fired over their budgets because of what we
Yes.
saw happen in 2018.
Yes.
So, and then you have the reverse side is true. The market softens up, prices go down. It's easy to find a truck. Now the shippers are overpaying because they're locked in a contractual rate. So I think Ron makes a good point. It would be nice to have something that wasn't as clunky as that.
Yeah.
The other thing that makes the market inefficient is that you have hundreds of thousands of carriers and you have hundreds of thousands of shippers. And you've got this big country of ours with all these miles. And so if you knew the exact percentage of the capacity that was running empty at any one point in time, you would be amazed at how inefficient that is. I talked to a truckload carrier recently that told me, even despite these much, much higher rates that we have, their total rate per mile was actually down year over year. Their total loaded rate per mile was up considerably. But what does that tell you? It tells you they're running a lot of empty miles. And why is that? Because, as we've recovered from COVID, it's been a very uneven recovery. So some industries have recovered faster, some slower, which starts to change the flows of freight. And so if you're a truckload carrier who's built a network around your core customers and they're recovering unequally, now suddenly you're running an imbalance in your network and you've got to run more empties to get it back inbound. So, between, the market changing, the surplus of carriers and shippers and, it's just too many moving parts. And you've come back to the convoy idea that you guys talked about the other day. It's a nice idea. If shippers want to pay on a cost plus basis, I love that, and we've been doing that, by the way, since 2006.
Yeah, you guys have been doing it for a long time.
Now we mostly do it with our contractual customers. And when I say contractual, I'm talking about managed trans.
Mm-hmm.
But it's because we've got to know them. They've got to know us. There's a trust factor. They believe that we can source well. They believe that we pay a fair price. And eventually the relationship evolves to a point where you want more transparency. And so customer says, hey, let's do it on a cost plus basis. And we negotiate what the margin is. And it's open book and it's fine. And we love that. And for the shippers that can do that, it does protect them, as long as their budgeting process allows for that sort of volatility in the future. I don't know if that idea works as well with RFP shippers who run a routing guide and award lanes, because they're dealing with so many parties. I think, you don't have the trust factor to know, okay, it's cost plus arrangement, but can I really trust that you're giving me the right cost, right? And if you can get over that hump, it's a good deal.
Yeah. When you guys have managed transportation, for those who don't know, could you explain it? And is it both? Is it more LTL than truckload, or is it both? Just for those people who, I saw a couple things popped up in the comments about managed transportation.
Yeah. So for us, managed trans is we basically agree with a customer for them to outsource their transportation management function to Echo. So just like some companies might outsource their HR department, or they might outsource their IT organization, some companies will outsource their transportation management function. And the companies that want to do that tend to be small to mid-sized companies who don't have a lot of staff committed to supply chain. They don't have any supply chain technology. They don't have data. They don't have the wherewithal to deal with hundreds or even thousands of transportation partners. So it's a great solution where we go in and work with the existing people and help them manage their transportation better using our technology and our network of
I
carriers.
was just about to
We
ask, can they
typically,
like log in? Do they have their own login and they can see all their shipments
yeah,
and stuff
so
with Echo?
so there's a lot of different ways we do it. I mean, they can use our customer portal and work in a self-service mode if they want. More generally, what we do is we do integration with their ERP systems. So as they're processing orders in their business, those orders are queuing up in our system
Oh,
for transportation. And we can run RFPs for them. We can do whatever they need. It's a multimodal service, so we do LTL, we do truckload, we do intermodal, and we even do a little international here and there. But I would say predominantly because of the size of the customers, they tend to be small to mid-sized companies. It's a little more heavy in the LTL.
yeah. I'm sorry, folks, I forgot. Amanda Miller, thank you for sending me questions. All right, follow up from our famous Mad Travelist, Andrew Teal, who someday I think Andrew Teal is actually just going to replace me. And we'll call the show Teal Dive. And it'll be me and him. He said, he has a follow up question for you. Tons of volume, rates went up. Why are their results not showing the home run? You might have hit on this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, I didn't even look at, I saw the headline, I didn't read the details, and I'm certainly not in a position to comment on what their business is doing or not doing. I will just make a general statement that when rates go up rapidly and you have contractual business that you've committed a price to, just like Andrew Silver talked about, if you want to hold to your commitments,
Yeah.
your margins are going to get squeezed, and on many loads you're going to lose money. And so, in a rising price environment, it can be tough on a broker's margins unless you can supplement it with spot rate.
Makes sense. The reason why I keep leaning toward asking you about LTL is I think, I could be wrong, you used to work for like a big LTL carrier before your tech startup maybe?
Yeah.
And what was your experience before you even got into tech, if anything? I'm just randomly asking that because I actually don't know the answer to this.
Well, I'll keep it short because it's probably a boring story. Well, I got out of college and I had two job offers. One was to go to EDS. I don't know if you remember that company. That was Ross Perot's company.
Ross Perot.
Yeah.
I forgot about
And
him.
then the other offer was a management training position with an LTL carrier who's no longer even in business. But at the time, they were the fourth largest trucking company. So I spent, the first half of my career working in LTL, and I worked in sales, operations, engineering, IT. I ran a couple of LTL carriers, and so yeah, I was an LTL guy. And when I got to Echo, um, Echo was less than a year old. Echo was predominantly a managed transportation company in 2006. I introduced LTL to Echo based on my industry knowledge and relationships.
Oh.
And we built all the way to the IPO. We built a big LTL brokerage. And then it wasn't really until about 2010 that we said, hey, we ought to do truckload too, because, oh, by the way, it's 10 times bigger than the LTL market. So we stumbled along for a couple of years because none of us, including me, really knew a lot about truckload, and we had to figure it out. But I would say, 2011, 12, 13 was kind of when we really started to build up our truckload shops.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think that so it's interesting for those who don't know. When I first got to Echo, because I was Echo's in-house counsel, Doug saved me from the burning dumpster fire of Global Trans, which at the time, you guys, Global Trans is a great company now. Ever since Bob took it over, it's been amazing. At the time that Doug plucked me from that company, it was a dumpster fire, and boy, was that back in the day. But I remember when I got in, people kept telling me Echo is like a master at LTL. They're so good at LTL, and you guys were pushing the truckload initiatives, and it was fun. And I think partial too. I think you were pushing as well, and it was fun to be part of that growth, and learn from that. Was it hard for you though to adjust going from a carrier to a tech company and then now going into brokerage? Because it's a different world, I feel for carriers and going into brokerage?
Yeah, there were several adjustments I had to make. Growing up in the LTL world, LTL carriers tend to be big companies, and so I worked at really big companies. In fact, I worked at YRC for many, many years, and had a lot of different positions at YRC. And also, you might remember Consolidated Freightways. I worked for them as well, and so I grew up in that big kind of corporate environment, of the asset-based trucking industry, labor intensive, and in fact, unionized labor.
Yep.
So that was the world I grew up in, and I worked a lot in operations out on freight docks, and so that was my world. When I started my little tech company, it was me and a guy that I used to work with, Daryl Scholl, just coming up with an idea and hammering code and spending a year writing the system and having some fun with that. But then when I joined Echo, the two founders are serial entrepreneurs. They formed many, many companies, including Groupon and others. And that was fun for me because they plucked me out of the corporate world, and they said, it was kind of a great marriage, right? They said to us, and they were young at the time, they were 38 years old, very successful, multiple successful startups. And I was kind of like the old guy in those days, in my late 40s. And they said, we need somebody with, executive experience and industry experience and all of that to help us build the company. And we're going to teach you how to be an entrepreneur. And so for me, it was a lot of fun to be taught how to be an entrepreneur because I'd grown up in the stuffy corporate world. And, I remember earlier in my career when I worked in the YRC, then called Yellow Corporate Office, you wore a suit and tie every day to work.
Damn.
And when you went in your office, you were allowed to take your coat off.
That sounds like what it's like to work at a law firm.
But if you left your office, you had to put your coat on, and it's not like that now. But, when I got here and I was introduced to these two 38-year-old entrepreneurs that were wild and crazy and took risk and rolled the dice, that was fun for me, because I've worked in a stodgy LTL industry where you're trying to save your way to prosperity all the time by cutting costs.
Yeah.
Now suddenly I got to spend money and, invest in growth. So it was fun.
Yeah, that does sound fun. And I would like to note for the record, I think one of those founders was a lawyer.
They're both lawyers.
They're both lawyers. See, Doug, not all lawyers are bad, are painful to deal with.
They're two lawyers that never practiced law. They got their law degree. Yeah.
And I think there's a story when they were in law school, they were like creating companies and doing different things too. I've got to get one of them on here, Brad Keywell and then Lefkowski, right?
Yep.
I know Lefkowski's brother really well. I always forget his first name, not the brother, but the other one.
Steve.
But anyhow, I should get and but I should get them on here one day to tell their entrepreneur stories because it's a pretty cool story. So hold on, questions have come through. So we have someone in the comments has said, Mike in the comments says, the new Convoy tool is anything different than plus cost? Dan said, okay, I don't think that's a question. Good point, Mike. I think we all think it's plus cost, but maybe cost plus. But I think Dan Lewis is actually going to be on the show again December 4th. So you guys send me or Amanda Miller your questions for him if you want to challenge whether or not his new model is cost plus or not. But John says, what does Doug think the future of LTL looks like? Seems like shared/partial truckload seems to be picking up.
Well, Echo's got a great partial truckload business, and there's a reason for it. There's a segment of freight that's too big to be LTL and too small to be truckload. Mm-hmm. And if you think about that, an LTL carrier has a very high cost structure. They've got all this brick and mortar. They've got all these trucks, all these employees, labor, potentially unionized labor. So the way that LTL carriers make money is keeping the trucks full and managing the price, and so they're always managing, their network utilization, and they're managing their yield or their revenue per hundredweight. Um, so I think that if you look at heavier shipments in most LTL trucking companies, they have to apply that high cost structure to the shipment to derive a revenue to charge the customer. And it's generally an astronomically high number. You know, I can remember if you get an LTL carrier to quote on 10,000 pounds, this was before they had spot rate programs. You know, it would cost more to ship 10,000 pounds with an LTL carrier than it does, you know, a full truck with a truckload carrier. Since then, the LTL carriers have gotten wise, and so now they realize that, hey, if I've got empty miles, I'm not going to charge my tariff rate on the 10,000 pound line. I'm going to make up a spot price that puts some revenue on my trailer while I reposition it back to where I need it. Truckload carriers, on the other hand, you know, if I've got 53 feet of trailer space and you're only going to use 10 of it, I still got to charge you for the whole thing, right? So you end up paying a lot more than you should. So the parcel business, you know, if those shipments that either based on weight or based on cube are in that kind of tweener category. And by being creative operationally, you can find ways to charge the customer more of like a proportional truckload cost than, you know, an inflated LTL cost. So that's I think why that market does well. In terms of the future of LTL, there's always going to be a need for LTL because, you know, the small parcel carriers can't take everything. They've got size limits. And if you can't buy a whole truckload, you need to ship it on pallets, and LTL carriers are how you do it. I think what's changing with LTL is more the nature of their networks. You know, you used to have lots and lots of long haul carriers and, you know, lots of 2,000-3,000 mile LTL shipments. You know, you barely see that anymore. And that's why you've seen the surge in regional LTL carriers who have a shorter length of haul, because shippers have gone more to, you know, regional distribution. They've got more DCs that are closer to their customers. So the overall length of haul is shrunken, and that's benefited regional LTL carriers. So there's a place for LTL, and I think that the companies today are doing well. You know, it seems like their revenues are good, their networks are full, and that's how they make money.
I didn't know LTL had a spot market. I thought it was all contracted via tariff. And
well, you know, because LTL carriers have a hub and spoke system, so they've got, you know, destination end of the line terminals that feed into a hub, that go to another hub, and then to the other destination terminal. So if you're shipping from Seattle to, you know, Atlanta, you know, your shipment's going to get handled multiple times. But if you have a 10,000 pound shipment and it's in an attractive lane for that carrier, meaning they run empty miles there, they don't fill their trucks, they'll take your 10,000 pound shipment and put it in the nose of the truck, and they'll never touch it again until it delivers. They'll load other freight behind it, and they'll take the freight off. And so that's, you know, that's an attractive way for them to utilize unused capacity.
for sure. And also, I remember though, at a couple different, I don't remember what world, but there are people who get really annoyed when carriers partial their freight and add other freight onto their shipment. So it's interesting because some carriers will do it to make money without telling the brokers or the shippers, and then they find out and they get pretty upset. Side note. But, Doug, more questions for you. Whoa. One question is a really good one. I'm going to wait on this one because this one's synergistic. Steven asks, LTL carriers, are they going to move away from I always mess this up, NMFC classification? I'm like, you know how you can't say cinnamon sometimes? That's the one for me. NMFC classification, and moved more toward DIM pricing. What does that mean?
Well, there's been a debate for you know, the NMFC system is you know, archaic, and it uses a huge tariff that basically classifies every commodity, and then based on the density of that product and its susceptibility to damage and kind of the value per pound, they come up with a numeric value. They call it a class, and then they refer to rate tables. So you can think of if you're shipping bowling balls, they're heavy and dense. They don't take up much space. They're difficult to damage. Those would be like a class 50. If you're shipping ping pong balls, they weigh nothing. you could fill up a whole trailer and barely have any weight, and LTL carriers charge by the pound. So they would give them a higher class, maybe class 400, and it would have a much, much higher rate per pound. It creates all these challenges between shippers and carriers and intermediaries where, the customer describes the commodity one way, the tariff doesn't exactly match it, the carrier reclassifies it. It creates a lot of headaches. It also makes it difficult for the carriers to cost the freight in their network and know if they're pricing it correctly or making a profit. So there's always been interest by the carriers to go to a density-based pricing system, much like international freight, where you're looking at the cube of the shipment, how much space does it take up, and what does it weigh, and what's the density in terms of pounds per cubic foot. The problem you have, and I actually studied this back early in my career when we were trying to do it, is it's hard to make the transition because there's a lot of shippers that have the archaic system built into their TMSs. And the other thing is, if I want to switch from a classification-based system to a density-based system, I can tweak, the pricing and make a shipper whole, where your total freight spend under the two systems is equal. Mm-hmm. But on a shipment by shipment basis, I'll never be able to match it shipment by shipment. So what happens on this shipment, I'm paying a premium. On this shipment, I'm getting a discount, but that shipment's going to one of my customers. And so if suddenly I raise that customer's freight prices, he's going to raise hell with me. And so carriers find it hard to sell a new pricing system to shippers that are ingrained in the old way. But I can tell you the carriers themselves would love to do it. And there are several carriers right now that are doing it, and they're pushing it hard, and they're trying to make it the new de facto standard. And I support that.
Yeah, I've heard of it lately too, and I think it's very interesting. I did notice some comments coming through. So my little brother is actually here. Chris Gaines, he's in the comments. He says this is great info for a guy just getting into freight. Chris is working for JB Hunt. He just started, I think, like a week ago, and he saw the Shelley Simpson episode and dove into the application process. And then Chris Baker just joined, and someone else asked if you guys are doing reefer LTL.
We do, but it's hard to do it, and you can only do it in certain areas because it takes special carriers that have the equipment. There have been several attempts in the past to create a product that is basically like a pallet with a refrigerated box on it. And there's been several companies that have attempted that, and it works well. The technology is great. There are these little portable refrigerators, and you put 1,000 pounds of your LTL freight in it and keep it cold all the way to the destination. The problem is, what do you do with that box when you deliver it? You got to get it back to where it came from, and somebody has to pay for that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's hard to do LTL unless it's a truckload reefer company that does milk runs, meaning they do drops and picks and multiple stops. And there are a couple of LTL reefer companies, but it's a fairly specific product.
There was another question that came through. You're getting drilled with questions. Don't worry, I'll have you off in 5 minutes. I heard all your alarms going off, and I hear Chris Clemenson being like, she's not gonna keep you for 2 hours again, is she? Doug, make her wrap up, Doug. I know, Chris. I know. I'll behave for once. Next time Doug comes on, I will not behave though. So the next question. Ooh, this is a tough one. So Echo recently lost 2 C-level executives. Is there something at Echo going on that we should know about? Ooh, a little drama. Who you lost? Kyle Sowers, the CFO, one of my favorite people in the whole world. He left, right? And then the other one was Miles, I think.
The question is there something going on?
Yeah, is there some Echo drama we need to know about? Ooh.
Yeah, no, there is something going on. There is something going on. What's going on is, in the last 15 years, we've built a startup company from 0 to $2.5 billion. We've been profitable every year since year number 1. We did an IPO. We've been very successful, and it was a talented team of people that made that happen. And when you have talented people that have success, other people try to steal them. And, we've always lived with that. And I hate to lose them on one hand. On the other hand, it makes me proud that people value what we have.
Yeah.
The and it also, creates an opportunity for people to move up. We moved up Pete Rogers. He's been our
Love
senior
Pete
vice
Rogers.
president. Well, he started as a staff accountant 13 years ago, and he's worked his way up. He's done all of our SEC work. He's earned the right, and he's going to step into the chair without a hitch. And so, look, at the end of the day, Echo runs like a machine. We put oil on it and keep trying to make it better and find ways to improve things. But, when you have a company in that state, we're all replaceable, including me.
Yeah.
And so the best thing that we can do is to have a strong bench and be ready for when those days come. And, it's part of life and business. People will come along with a good deal and try to steal you away. And we've always had to deal with that.
I know the answer to this question because I worked for you, but there are some companies that if a C-level executive leaves, operations just crumble because they were for lack of better words, almost the bottleneck of decisions and direction and whatnot. And then there are other companies where they build their bench and of leaders, and the leaders are taught to train your future leaders to take over our positions. Which one is Echo?
Well, it's a great question because, I think back to the early days of Echo when we were truly a startup. And it was I'm sure like other startups, right? It was a wild, wild west, and in fact, until we got to about 400 million of revenue, we outsourced HR, because we were trying to save a buck or two. And so, in those early days, we would change things all the time. We would try something, and if it didn't work, we would stop and do something different. And then if we tried something and it worked, we would do it harder. And that was just kind of how we operated. But then over the course of the years, you get bigger, you have to necessarily add some bureaucracy, right? And you don't always want to because you don't want to lose the entrepreneurial spirit, but you have to, right? And you have to grow up as a company. And so we've done that, and we try to keep our entrepreneurial DNA intact and try not to get too bureaucratic. But in the process of growing up, we have a world-class HR organization, and they do things like succession planning, and so we have regular sessions, not only in our management team, but with our board, where we talk about, okay, what happens when Doug gets hit by a truck? Or what happens if this person finds a better deal, and so we have those discussions on a regular basis. And that's something that all, larger, more seasoned companies have to do. And if you're a public company, you have to do it.
Yeah.
And so I think, I feel good that we've built a good bench. We do a lot of training and employee development, in our organization. We think about people's career paths. We coach them on their career paths. And there's a lot of people who want to get promoted. So it's a good opportunity to be here.
Just so you guys know, when he says bureaucracy, he's pointing at me. You guys just can't see it. I was one of his bureaucracy. I was his first lawyer he had to hire in-house. boy, what poor man. Okay, so last question for you. Darn it. Okay, this will take 2 seconds because this is a really good one. I've been saving this. This is from Mike. He said, Doug, did you hang out with the Eagles? Are you in a band, Doug?
Yeah, I'm in a band, but I never hang out with the Eagles.
Oh man, that would have been cool if you said yes. You're in a band. What instrument do you play?
I play bass and sax and little keys and different things.
You're one of those talented people.
Oh
my God.
I used to hang out with Steve Miller a little bit back in the Bay Area.
That's what it was, Mike. Steve Miller. Steve Miller's good. That's cool. All right, we finished strong then. So Doug, Chris Clemenson, this wasn't that bad. Look, no games. We stayed on time. He can make his next meeting. So everybody's happy. Doug, thank you so much. We all love you to pieces. And we will see you next time. Next time is not going to be as easy, though. We're going to have games and inappropriate conversations and cursing. Endless amounts of cursing.
Well, thanks for having me, Cassandra.
Thank you. I will see you next time. And everybody else, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. And we'll see you next Friday where we're going to have to talk about Mexico shipping part 2 with Andrew Silver's brother, Matt Silver. I can't, these silvers are taking over my life lately. All right, let me get my little ending screen. Ooh.